It is a cop's worst nightmare. A shooter is on the loose, killing innocent people at random, and he won't stop until taken down. And it could happen anywhere. A school, a church, a crowded mall, or a place of business. Although active shooter incidents often end quickly, they are deadly and present local law enforcement officials with one of their biggest challenges of the post-9/11 environment: how to organize, train, and equip for the emerging threat of small unit terrorist attacks involving small arms and improvised explosives. It is not something that police officers train for on a regular basis, but it is part of the new reality facing cops across the country at every level. Raising the question, are our patrol officers prepared for what could be part of the next wave of terrorist attacks here at home? At least one expert doesn't think so. So in this episode of the Threat Matrix, we'll explore why and what law enforcement should be doing to produce full-spectrum police officers capable of responding to the next generation of active shooters. My name is Dan Verton. I've got 7 years in military intelligence and another 10 as an investigative journalist covering high-tech national security. I've held a top-secret security clearance, and my sources as a journalist have reached into the highest levels of government. In this series, I'm lifting the veil of secrecy that surrounds the most important issues in homeland security and the global war on terrorism. This is the Threat Matrix, and it's the one intelligence briefing you don't want to miss. International terrorism is in a constant state of evolution. Terrorists routinely change their tactics, techniques, and procedures in an effort to defeat new security precautions put in place by governments around the world. So as we continue to focus our attention on closing the gaps in transportation security, Homeland Security experts warn that we must remain vigilant for what many say is the most likely avenue of attack for the next wave of terrorist activity: small unit swarming attacks involving small arms and improvised explosives. And terrorists are no strangers to small unit swarming tactics. Mumbai, India, 2008. 10 gunmen armed with automatic weapons and grenades come ashore on an inflatable speedboat and disperse into 2 groups. They operate in 2-man teams, attacking 5 separate targets, including the high-profile Taj and Oberoi hotels. The attackers plant explosives and open fire at random. The chaos they unleash sends local Indian law enforcement into a complete tailspin. The siege lasts 60 hours and costs the lives of 173 people. Beslan, Russia, 2004. 32 Chechen terrorists swarmed down upon a secondary school, taking children and teachers hostage and rigging the building with explosives. The siege lasts for more than 2 days before a shootout with Russian security forces finally ends the standoff. A total of 334 people are killed, including 186 children. America is no stranger to small arms terrorism. Washington, D.C., 2002. For 3 weeks in October, 2 gunmen plunged the nation's capital and surrounding region into complete chaos. John Allen Muhammad and his teenage accomplice, Lee Boyd Malvo, killed 10 people and injured 3 others, firing a high-powered rifle from the back of a Chevy Caprice. The killing rampage and the ability of the 2 assailants to avoid capture give authorities a chilling glimpse of the devastation that a small group of unsophisticated terrorists can produce using only small arms.
I got to see firsthand how a relatively small, untrained force could outmaneuver multiple municipalities and could, yes, terrorize an entire community, an entire state, multiple states. These were 2 people relatively untrained, equipped with one rifle. This rifle itself wasn't fully automatic. It didn't take a lot of skill. You know, at the time, people were talking about how this must have been a skilled, trained sniper. But the reality is, it doesn't take a lot to inflict a great deal of damage. It takes mostly motivation. The tool, the gun, the explosive, that's a secondary concern, to be frank.
Of course, the shooting incidents at Virginia Tech and Columbine High School in Colorado remain at the forefront of current thinking about active shooter response. But it was an incident that occurred more than 10 years ago that opened the eyes of all in law enforcement to the reality of being outgunned. North Hollywood, California, 1997. Would-be bank robbers Larry Phillips Jr. and Emil Matasareanu emerged from the Bank of America building to find several LAPD officers waiting for them. The situation quickly turns from conventional bank robbery to a full-blown gun battle in the streets of Hollywood. Unknown to the LAPD at the time, Phillips and Matasareanu are wearing body armor and carrying specially modified Romanian rifles, a modified HK-91, an AR-15, and more than 3,000 rounds of ammunition. The police are severely outgunned and are forced to raid a local gun shop for heavier weapons. The shootout lasts 44 minutes and leaves 10 officers and 7 civilians severely wounded. Both Phillips and Matasareanu are killed. As terrorism involving small arms and improvised explosives continues to creep across the globe, experts like Fred Leland, an active duty police officer in Massachusetts, and the primary training officer for Law Enforcement Security Consulting Incorporated, say local law enforcement needs to do more to prepare its officers for the new tactical homeland security environment they are required to operate in. It requires nothing short of what he calls the development of full-spectrum police officers.
Full-spectrum policing was a term that was coined by a LA County Sheriff's Officer, John Sullivan, who's done a lot of intelligence work. And I had done a lot of writing and training in the area of police operational art, which is a big missing link between strategy and tactics. What we're looking for with a patrol officer is a guy who's able to go out and do his basic duties in a patrol car, interacting with the people, whether he's talking about a barking dog in a neighborhood, and then he's able to, within an instant, turn to a dangerous and deadly encounter, like an active shooting, on a moment's notice. That's what we mean by full spectrum. Problem today is patrol officers aren't prepared or are not full spectrum cops. And I say that in the most humble way I can. What's happened is they're used to dealing with the things they deal with daily, the daily problems. They also engage with dangerous sets of circumstances. But the training is not up to par to dealing with these unconventional types of threats that we're talking about. One-on-one dealing with a guy is one thing. Dealing with a guy who's actively in an environment, shooting randomly people is a whole other set of circumstances. Yet, the expectations are that they deal with it and that they go handle it. And that takes training. And it's a big missing link in law enforcement to get a guy from a basic patrol officer to a guy who can handle himself tactically in these converging threats. Take, for an example, I know it happened in India, but let's take it for an example because it's an emerging threat coming from other places. Mumbai, you had 10 guys in two-man teams disrupt that whole city for 60 hours. Killed hundreds of people and hundreds of others wounded. And there was a lack of training in that agency as well, which shows, I mean, a police department, a highly trained police department with individual office trained, shouldn't have to wait for a SWAT team to engage and should be able to deal with those types of threats, because they're emerging and they're coming, and we have to be prepared to deal with it. And you can't sit around waiting for some team for an hour to come out and deal with it. Currently today, the average patrol officer is receiving basic academy training in tactics, which is very basic. Problem is there's no consistency in training. In other words, after they're out of an academy, it doesn't continue unless you're either one, involved in a team, or two, you're a self-initiated person who takes it upon himself to learn those skills. And that's prevalent in law enforcement. So the basic training they're getting is basic room clearing techniques, like I said, for probably a 40-hour period in the police academy. Nowhere near enough to even get comfortable doing the basics. Yet they need to be more full spectrum. They need to be more able to apply one, two-man movement to a threat using tactics, not just a reckless response, but actually using thought-out tactics that apply to the set of circumstances. Knowing something's great, but if you can't apply it, it doesn't do anybody any good. And that's a very important thing to note in law enforcement. Firearms training, which is a physical skill. Still, today, despite the talk of simunitions and shooting, moving targets and all these things, there's still no incorporation of the cognitive ability to think on your feet and respond with a firearm, which is something that we have to be able to do. And your basic patrol officer is not getting that training either. You know, you take an individual cop who works the street alone, all of a sudden he's responding to an active shooting scenario at a mall or a school, all right? And he's never worked tactically with the other three guys that do show up, or even the other second guy. There's no small unit tactical training. There's no 1, 2, or 3, or 4-man training after most people get out of the academy, or there's very little of it.
A recent study of more than 40 active shooter incidents revealed that most active shooter crimes are over within 8 minutes. This has significant implications for the first responding officers. If the determination has been made that life is in immediate danger, an initial course of action must be developed within 1 minute. There literally is no time to waste. And while active shooter incidents are generally handled differently from hostage situations or barricaded persons, it is important to understand that active shooter scenarios can quickly transition into a different type of crime scene. But what really makes an active shooter scenario different from almost all other potential situations is the tyranny of time. The first officers to arrive on the scene cannot wait for SWAT to arrive. They must act immediately to save lives. It is a come-as-you-are situation, meaning you will confront the perpetrators with the weapons, equipment, training, and personal capabilities you arrive on scene with. The current thinking on rapid deployment to active shooter scenarios is based on the lessons learned from the Columbine massacre. It is no longer considered strategically or tactically sound to set up a security perimeter and wait for a SWAT team to arrive. Officers are now required to enter the facility or structure and move toward the sound of the guns. Searching and room clearing is conducted only when the source of the shooting is unknown. Likewise, the initial entry team moves past victims, even those who may be crying out for help. The primary objective is and must remain to neutralize the shooter. As with all military and violent law enforcement encounters, No plan, however well constructed, survives contact with the enemy. The reality of the situation is that the fog of war will cause uncertainty. There will be friction on the battlefield. You may not have all the officers you need or would like. Your radios may or may not work, and there may not be a rescue team immediately available. But you still have to move to contact and stop the threat.
My whole premise is strategic and tactical mindset to every scenario you approach, using your skills, your awareness abilities, the Boyd cycle, the ability to make observations when you approach a scene. And that includes not just where the front door is, where's the threat, all right? What's the best way to approach the threat? When I move, what's my best entry point to get to the threat as quick as I possibly can? When I get there, am I reading individuals that may be fleeing, looking for armed subject mixed in, or are they all innocents trying to escape? Because despite the training and lockdowns and everything else, there's going to be some folks who are still wandering and trying to, in a panic mode, trying to get out. And you have to be able to decipher the differences. So the Boyd cycle, your observations are powerful, and not just the observations, but what is it telling me? What's going on? Do I need to enter? Is there life in imminent jeopardy here? Do I need to move? If that's the case, then you have to move, and you have to move in a tactical way to the scene to deal with that particular threat. And that's something that we don't spend a lot of time teaching patrol guys. SWAT guys get plenty of that. Patrol guys, not much of it at all, if any.
Those guys are all hanging there now.
In most scenarios, the hard facts are that the patrol officer responding to an active shooter scenario is going to be emotionally charged. And that's one piece of the training we need to focus on, is how to teach guys to control those emotions. Because the emotions lead them to a front door and just a non-thought-out response, what I call a reckless response. There isn't any thought process involved in a lot of cases. Now, there's always exceptions to the rule. We're talking overall and in general here. And that part of it is very good. It's great, because we need to get inside and we need to get there to deal with a threat. But what's happened is there seems to be a blind disregard for, if the shot's fired, we just need to go. And my premise is there has to be some thought process into doing these things. Whether you wait for the 3 or 4 man team, or you respond as a 1-man team, which is, or a 2, which are controversial, especially the 1-man team, to go it alone. There may be a time where you have to do that. That goes against every principle a police officer has been taught since day one. Always wait for your backup, something that's driven into our brains from day one. Yet, here you are in a situation where you hear gunshots, you know people are being killed, and you may need to respond. Obviously, again, this takes a guy who's capable of doing it. And that's an important thing to not lose sight of. If the individual officer is not capable because he doesn't have the training, then he may be more of a problem. We may have another person down instead of somebody actually being stopped. So he has to have that ability to do it. And that's another missing link. Most people think that a guy in a uniform should be able to do it. And it's not the way it is. There's some people who just cannot function in a tactical way that are law enforcement. And it takes specialized training and consistent training on a regular basis to create and nurture that type of individual. I think sometimes when we know we have backup immediately nearby, we may respond with that bravado because everybody's here, let's go, and it's reckless. A prime example would be the Oakland shooting back in March, where 4 officers were killed in a 2-hour time frame. You had 2 officers down. Obviously breeds emotion. They had over 115 people respond to that call. Unnecessary. I understand the emotion of wanting to go brother officers down, but is that helpful? Is that strategically and tactically helpful to a scene? We'll tell parents not to go to a high school at a Columbine because it causes problems, yet 115 people respond to 2 officers down. Let the district deal with it. Let them call in people that they need for help. All right. What happened in that scenario is there was an over exuberant or a heightened sense of urgency, or a false sense of urgency to go get the shooter in that case, which led to forming a informal team, guys who have never worked together, responding to and trying to take out, capture the suspect who shot them 2 officers, which led to 2 more officers being killed. It's unacceptable in my mind, Dan, to think that in 2010, now, after all the years now since the 70s and the Newhall incident of officer survival training, we still are emotionally responding to calls. And we need to spend a lot more time focusing on developing the strategic and tactical skills. Not in theory alone. Theory's important, but you've got to be able to apply these things in a way that makes sense while you're reading a hot and dynamic scene. Strategy is what our end goal is. We want to get in, stop an ongoing deadly action from taking place. Tactics are what we use to get to that end. The missing link's the middle, operations, or operational art. And all it is, in my view, operational art is taking what you know and being able to apply it to meet the end, to affect your strategy. And there's a missing link. We know it, we understand what we want to do, but we don't have the skills, cognitive, physical abilities to apply it at the level we need to, at the level we need to. A lot of these guys responding throughout this country over the years have responded with basically just their instincts and their gut. We need to be better than that. And it should start, in my opinion, it should start from the moment they're in a police academy. That's where it has to start, because you got a culture that's used to, you got a police culture now that's used to doing things the way we've done them forever. And it's not a culture that's conducive to dealing with these more serious threats. It's just not. Matter of fact, there's an interesting term you'll hear in law enforcement, the 5% of mindset. And when you hear that, you say, oh, that's a good thing. You have a 5%er on you. But think about it. That's 5%. What that means is 5% of the police officers out there have the mindset, the self-initiative, the willingness, and the ability to go train and do things on their own to be able to go out there and prepare. 5% of mindset. What's that say about the other 95%?
So that is saying that the police community itself accepts the fact that there's 5% of them who have those qualities, those abilities.
Yeah. The fact of the matter is, yeah, it's accepted. And when I talk about that term with guys, it puts them, it sets them back. They look, because, you know, in a lot of cases, policing's a funny job, law enforcement's a funny job, security a funny job, because it's not your typical job. It's a job that requires that 5% of mindset to take hold in a much bigger number. It should be 95%. People have this type of ability and the capabilities. So now you're talking about different attributes, you know, such as strength of character, decision-making capability, integrity, honor, self-initiated, creative, innovative, ability to interact, social skills. All these things come into play. And it's an important component, yet it is accepted and it's a common in the tactical realm. In the street survival, or officer survival realm, it's talked about regularly. And it's sad. It's sad that that's the mindset. And we accept it as, hey, he's a 5%er. But as a profession, that's unacceptable, because we need to have a much higher level, or many more of these guys. It needs to be 95% that have that mindset.
You know, local law enforcement, our first responders don't lack in courage. I can tell you that. They prove that they are courageous and dedicated every day. I think if I have a concern, it is in the ability to make rapid decisions, to make decisions fast enough to affect the outcome. And as I have analyzed school shootings, mall shootings, domestic shootings, it is that inability to understand what is happening soon enough and fast enough so that our responders can effectively deploy their skills and equipment in response to that threat. That is where I see we have an opportunity to improve. Again, it is not an indictment of responders. These people put it on the line every day, but I think we owe it to them to come up with methodologies, tools, policies, best practices that allow them to make decisions about what is happening sooner so that they can deploy their resources sooner and affect the outcome.
The OODA loop, also known as the Boyd cycle, is basically a decision-making process. How we make decisions. It was developed by Colonel John Boyd over almost a 50-year time frame. Long story short, in simple terms, it is observation using all our senses, all of them, including intuition, the gut feeling we have, so help us orient to what's going on. Orientation phase is the second O. Basically, what's happening. What is everything I'm seeing with all my senses telling me? Then, based on that, we make decisions and, critical, take action. Take action to put our decision into play. And that leads us to another component is to do this, we all make observations, we can all think about what we're seeing, which is based on either implicit in a rapidly changing set of circumstances, implicit information gathering, or explicit if there's more time and less risk involved. We have to make determinations and make judgments. Once we make that judgment and determination, we have to make some form of decision and take action. You have to possess the strength of character to put your decision into action. It doesn't do us any good to come up with these ideas and then sit and wait for somebody else to okay it, because time's critical. In these types of scenarios, either people are dying inside, fractions of a second matter. It could be you miss saving a life you could have, or if it's in another set of circumstances, you confront the active shooter themselves, that fraction of a second for you to make that decision because you're unsure if you wanted to, or if you should, could cost you your life. And that's an important component. Simply, the OODA loop is about learning. It's about learning, unlearning, and relearning on the fly. And it's an important thing to be able to do. A lot of focus and a lot of talk on awareness and law enforcement, but not a lot of actively developing that skill. Command evolves from the first guy on the scene. First guy on the scene has a read. He's using his Boyd cycle. He's processing information. He's capable of feeding the information up the chains from the bottom up so that everybody knows what's going on. It's critical. A critical piece to getting this done effectively is the leadership component. Leaders have to be working in more of a adaptive leadership mentality, which means they have to train their folks with the training and the skills that they need. Nurture that training with ongoing training. And then when they set them free to go handle a call like an active shooter, they have to trust them to get it done. And that's important component, because if the guy doesn't have that trust in the leadership, he's going to be confused as to what to do, to put it in simple terms. And it's going to cause hesitation. It's going to cause friction. It's going to cause a delay in response, and we can't have it. And I'm a big proponent, there should be less conversation. Critical things should be coming out. Not every move, I'm at room, whatever. You don't have to do that. Focus on the critical. Let us know where your location is. Let us know what you think's going on. If you're the first responding guy, let people know that where the kill zone is, where, what safe way to approach the scene. These types of issues. Guys responding, stay back. Don't get on the radio unless you see something critical. There's a lot of issues in law enforcement today from guys I talk to where if there's a dangerous scene, everybody's talking and the guy at the scene can't get to the radio. And he's the most crucial guy. That has to end. For some reason, there seems to be a feel that more noise on the radio, more control. We don't need that. You want to be in command as a boss or a commander on scene. You want to be in command, but in a sense out of control. Trust your guys to do what they know how to do. And again, that comes back down to making sure patrol guys are trained. I've had it said to me in training, we can't do this, Freddie. Exactly has been said. And the point is, you can do it.
Now, we've already experienced the impact, the disaster caused by deranged or criminal people who have used small arms to inflict damage on our communities.
You have to drive this home one person at a time. It needs to get to leaders in law enforcement. The leadership has to buy into these things.
What we're looking at now is what is the potential for a terrorist, those motivated by terrorism, to use a similar tactics that they use overseas now, quite frankly, to bring those to the U.S.
Don't do it because I say it's worth doing. Look at it, study it, learn about it, focus on it, and see the difference.
There's a train of thought in the intelligence and operational security community to let's not talk about it. Let's don't talk about these things because you'll give them an idea. Well, that's just foolishness.
I've used these techniques in my own agency and I've trained some other agencies in it. They work.